What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to the Chariot Friends. Justin here, and how you feeling? The moon is in Libra, and I like the moon in Libra. Honestly, this is minus the square to my sun. This is usually a pretty smooth one for me. A lot of activity, usually a lot of chatting that's going on. It's in my house of communication, but we're really going to talk about because this is a curious place for the moon. The moon is about waxing and waning, the flux of the things that we're feeling and the emotions, and Libra is more on the cerebral level, being that air sign, and how they keep things in balance, holding opposing views, and that sort of. So there's a lot of movement in this lunation here. We're going to talk about all that here in the moment and how we stay in balance and make progress with that and finding that equilibrium. But before we jump into that, if you're new here again, my name is Justin, and know that when you're coming across this video, you're in sync with the moon, and who doesn't love that? But this is also a place for you if you happen to have Cancer in your placements, Sun, Moon, Rising, maybe Venus, wherever. This one's for you. I actually just met someone with another person with a Venus in Cancer, and that is always a lovely translation. That's a really nice placement. But this is for anybody. You have Cancer in your placement somewhere, and you should probably know what's going on with there, because Big Papa's about to enter there soon, and Jupiter's gonna make it rain. I'm here for Jupiter in Cancer, but I'll talk about what sign it's in, what phase it's in. Oh wait, no, I do tarot card spreads. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Based off our lovely luminary, the good old moon. I actually got a nice little picture that I'm gonna post a little later today, and I'll talk about what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it's going. Boy, of course, it's all them lunar shenanigans. And just so you're all aware, this is a general reading, not a one-to-one. So take what fits into your story, discard the rest, and everything will be dope. Now, let's jump into it. Because yes, we got some stuff to talk about here. Again, this is a chatty one for me. But before we get into all that, well, I mean, no, I'm just going to be chit-chatting at you. Depending on when you're watching this, happy Jupiter Day. What a buoyant day to do this. Jupiter's associated with Thursdays. And you know, Jupiter really is about that quest for something bigger in life. There is, and the excitement that comes into that, but also the faith that there is more out there to be experienced and to be seen, and that this life never really is boring. There's more things that are going on around us all the time. You know, there's a lot of philosophy and theology that kind of gets into Jupiter, kind of asking those sort of big questions. So I find that Jupiter days can be, or even Jupiter hours can be, just a great time for expanding your worldview. Maybe check out a genre of music that you never listened to, or certain book that you've never read, or maybe even like playing around with certain spices. I was just playing around with this little cumin mix, man. It's doing it. And then I looked at everything that's in. It's like, oh, I have most of these things. It's just like, oh, I just need to combine them a certain type of way. Now we got, Justin Curry. So that's exciting. but but that's the whole point of Jupiter Day. You'd have thought I was born on a Jupiter Day. But yeah, those are one great ways that I like working with Jupiter days. But also, too, and not just for learning stuff, for teaching the things that you know. Maybe you already have a curry season. You're just like Justin. You need to try this one before you do anything. And it's just like, probably. And I'm here for it. But also, yeah, just teaching what you know. But one thing, too, that I like to do is just like, how do I deal with Jupiter transit? I actually got Jupiter transiting, because I got Jupiter's been hitting up my Leo placements quite a bit. And Gemini's are usually a good time for me. And Cancer's a little bit of a milder one. I mean, of course, it's going to hit my sun and like no nodes, but that's it. The only other time Jupiter's just hanging out, which I don't mind again. He can hang out in a better place. But this is, I like to keep track of those, and also just like any transits to Jupiter, because sometimes my Sun and my Jupiter fall on the exact minute and degree, just one's in Cancer, one's in Leo. And there's certain areas like in Taurus and in Scorpio, and even in like Libra, and in Aries, there are times where both of them are being activated at the same time. And so it's always a really kind of complex transit that's going on. I just actually was just going through a transit, and it's fine. We came out at the other end with Big Papa today. So, but yes, those are just some things that I'd like to think about with Jupiter. Looking at Jupiter return, I got a Jupiter return coming up next year, so that's going to be exciting. New intentions, new self-growth, new ideas. I got some big ideas coming. But that's enough about Big Papa. I could talk about him all day. Let's get into the lunar shenanigans. Because on the 8th of May, depending on when you're watching this, the moon would have entered into Libra at about 12:07 a.m., pretty early, and that's Pacific time. and it's in a waxing gibbous phase. And this is when the moon is getting close to fullest. Is that like, like 80, 85 degrees or percent of brightness. And it's just like, it's always an exciting period because the full moon is around the corner, or at least it can be an exciting time depending on what's going on, because sometimes the moon, especially since we're going to have our lunation in Scorpio where the moon falls, where there could be this bigness, that we're maybe feeling coming. It's just like, yeah, maybe we may not be excited about that. And I think that what's one thing to check in with the gibbous is, how are you feeling about how things are going right now? Because you're really going to see it in its fullest when we get into the full moon here. And again, the moon's in Scorpio, so we're really going to maybe be feeling some type of way about something, especially if it hasn't met that expectations. Do you need to maybe, I don't want to say lower them, but adjust maybe what you're expecting? Maybe you thought like you could run a marathon in a month, but really we can barely get down the block in a month. And that might just be something where it's like, okay, you know what, let's push this off another year. Let's go ahead and get down 2 blocks and then 10 blocks and then marathon, and then you'll be at the marathon before you know it. But yeah, I do think it's like checking in to see how you're feeling about that. But then let's get into the Libra side of this thing too, because this is where the air moons can be a really kind of complex time, because now the feelings are getting wrapped up in the mental space. Because Libra, they're ruled by the lovely Venus one, and they are the cardinal air sign. They're active or yang in nature. So they are the initiators of thought. That's something I think Libra can always get talked about. It's like beautiful and relationships and whatnots, but it's beautiful like the power of the thought, the first idea when you're really excited about something. Can this do this? But whenever there is a reaction, there's always an opposite reaction. And Libra almost has this like contract with chaos, where you can see that indecisive. I remember talking with the Libra sun about this, and it's like, he had told me where it's like, it's not that I haven't decided on what to do, it's that I've seen all of the options and they're all really good, so I just don't do anything because I don't want to miss out on one of them. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, I'm here for that. I have Moon in Gemini, so I get it. Options sound great in theory, but sometimes there can be such thing as like too many, because then you're just like, yeah, then I'm good. I'm good on that. I just can skip the bounty altogether. And I think that this Libra here is understanding, Libra being the scales, that adjustment of like expectation versus reality. I set this, I want to do this intention and this thing, and then this is what happens. You get, I remember reading something, failure doesn't describe something, like it was that relationship between failure and then success, and that how they go hand in hand, and that where there's one, there's always going to be another. You know what I mean? But that leaves opportunities for growth and expansion, because you don't know what you don't know until you know. And so that's where that, even that, I'm thinking about that relationship with like Jupiter and Saturn, even how they balance each other out. If you just have just abundance and just growth all the time, then it's a Cancer. It's something that is an overgrowth of things, and it's just like, it's just covering everything. But then when things die off and then feed the ground, then there's a natural rhythm to things here. And I think that is just really this lunation, this moon, over these next couple of days, is just thinking about the ways that you've kept in balance, but also to appreciate the progress that you've put into the things that you've done, even if things tend to fall short. Because let's go ahead and get into your general energy of the day, which is hexagram 53, which is progress, and that is wind over mountain. And there's a link down in the description box that has all of the hexagrams and their translation there and what they mean, and give you something to meditate on. Some very, really fascinating things when you work with these hexagrams. But you don't have any changing lines for this one, so we're just going to focus on the main hexagram, which is favorable for a maiden's marriage, auspicious omen. And I like when Spirit's real simple like that, because I think we're in a period of time where I actually didn't have to do a weekly video one, because we didn't have, because I work with the classical planets. I keep in mind where the outer planets are, of course, but I mainly work with the classical planets, and there weren't any aspects that were happening with them this week. And sometimes you need that kind of simple, kind of quiet message, so it gives you time to kind of focus on yourself. Because there can be this time where we talk about, oh my gosh, there's so much energies, there's so much this, so much that, but you might not be feeling anything. But then when things are quiet, then there's an opportunity for you to strike. There's a thing for you to go through your transits, to get back in tune with you. I check my chart every day. to see where things are at, how things are going along, and what am I really, how am I actually showing up for this energy? Am I really milking this for how much it's worth, or did I? And I try not to even let just a transit pass by. I went through, just give you an example. I went through it was going through a kind of a little complex transit. It's like I got Mars doing some things, Mercury's doing some things, and like there's smooth stuff, but there's hard things too, with the sun being in Taurus, activating things. It's just like, okay. And so, but thankfully we didn't have a lot of like kind of real cosmic stuff going on, so that gave me time to really kind of be with my things, so that it wasn't just a waste of time, so that it was something that I can take something from this and create a new sort of opportunity, look at what the progress that I've been doing has, when what opportunity, like what doors that's opened up for me. And that's what I think that this energy is wanting you to do as well. This is favorable for marriage, and Libra's all about romance and love. You want to talk about it on a modern sense, and there's that always that kind of charisma and things with Libra. And so I think this would be a great time for you to do something beautiful for yourself. Have a celebration. It gives me like Three of Cups energy, very Venus and Cancer, where we're celebrating amongst the people that we love. So time to, even though, again, there may have been maybe some bumpiness that's going on. Now the wind coming from the mountain is, hey, we can relax a little bit. We can do some things. We can go sit outside. We can go be in the sun. We can go be in the whatever that's looking like our comfort zone, our space, and just kind of enjoy just being alive, and and having gotten through all the things that we're going through. And that's not to say there aren't going to be more things to come. The wind is always changing. But when it's in a time of calm, sometimes you just got to just take it. Take the wind for what it is. And yeah, and that's what I'm really kind of getting with this one. This is a really kind of, again, I feel like a really kind of straightforward sort of progression here. And I think, and I think too that this would be one, if you are planning some sort of like marriage, or maybe some sort of like proposal and things, this may be a time where it's just like no time like the present. Maybe you've been planning, waiting for certain things to align, and where we want to, of course, work with auspicious timing and things like that, of course, but sometimes there's no better time than the present, because we're not always promised that time. So that's just another little thing, if that's a message that, if you need something for that. But let's go ahead and get into the tarot here, because I'm going to be pulling, first, before we get into these things, these readings that I do, they're not gender-specific readings, so apply these energies to people as they make sense for your situation. And I'm going to talk about different topics, such as like money matters, and medical things, and law, romance, but they're by no means professional advice. Go talk to your financial advisors, your lawyers, your healers, your doctors, therapists, all those good people. Go show them some love. Now, I'm going to be pulling 6 cards here, and they're each going to cover different themes. And since you don't have any changing lights, we're not going to get any clarifiers, so I'm just going to alternate between these decks here to get a little variety. But let's go ahead and get into your first card here, which talks about any sort of like short-term money matters or any things like that. So you got the Ace of Wands in reverse. And I would be mindful, like with the Ace of Wands, that's the root of fire. That's a time to get, when you feel that inspiration there, like I said, there's no time like the present. So this would be like maybe taking a bit of and again, a calculated risk. If the thing that you're wanting to, let's say, invest, or put your resources towards, your time, whatever, think about this. Is this like an impulse, or is this an investment? And I think that'll give you the answer that you want. And sure, could the situations be in better position? Sure. But it's just like, how many opportunities do you want to let go by until you actually do some things? You know what I mean? There can be maybe maybe you're waiting for a big outer transit, like kind of that's going on. This is just a vague example. But maybe there's something going on personally in your chart that's coming up. Maybe you have like something in your secondary progressions that's getting ready to happen. Maybe you're in the middle of a certain lunar return, a solar return, something where there's some big things that are happening, and like more so in the now that you could be acting up upon there. So, but of course, there is always a responsibility aspect with this energy. If things don't feel in alignment, I'd be mindful about that, of just being too risky, because you got to be, whatever you catch on fire, that thing's going to be on fire, and sometimes it's hard to put that fire out when something started. So that's just another sort of thing that's coming through there. But And I even get to just to being mindful of where you spend your energies. I think there's more time that we have available for us to do things than maybe we give ourselves some credit for. Sometimes it's just like really kind of carving out that space. I just carved a whole hour out for something, which normally like an hour costs a lot. So it's like, like is this thing? But when I weighed the thing, it was like, oh, this is an investment. So, like that's just something I'm just kind of picking up there as well. So let's get into your next card, which talks about any sort of like medical matters, things along those lines. See how the body's doing. So you got the Hermit here, Virgo energy. And Virgo I find is really, I think one sign that really needs to be in tune with the body, understanding the changes that the body goes through. And that's maybe what's going on. Maybe you're going through a place where you need to just kind of sit with something. That could be a thing that's going on there. Or maybe, I'm even getting maybe this energy of, and of course this could always be if you've been in a space where you've been cooped up too long, that to make sure just to get outside. You can have this introspection, but be out to get some air as well, because sometimes that energy can get stagnant, and it'll just keep you in a. It's just thinking about even with Libra, comparing the opposites. Sometimes you need that thing to test against, to see where you're at in life, to see what was this hermiting for, in a way. Maybe this is, maybe talking with like one person, maybe just kind of having a private conversation about a decision maybe that's being made possibly, and you need someone to kind of weigh the pros and cons. Maybe you've been kind of teetering back and forth on maybe a decision you need to make. Maybe you're in there taking care of someone possibly there, but and even gave into, I think, something there, just like getting them outside, or maybe even something to help keep that energy in there fresh while they're maybe having to go through this could be maybe, and I'm not, I'm thinking incense, but if you can't have incense, even just like taking some like going getting some like rosemary and just like boiling that can kind of just let that boil for a bit. That can clear the air up, and especially if there's been any sort of like sickness or anything like that, to just something that can just kind of freshen things up a little bit. So that's just another thing that's coming through there. Aromatherapies is something that's kind of popping in my head there. Okay. Let's get some tea. And then let's get to your next card, which talks about any sort of like legal matters or social affairs, things along those lines. I know it's an interesting combination. Oh, maybe it is. So you got the Five of Wands in reverse here, and maybe there's something going on where I'm getting in either sense. There's a bit of combativeness that's coming on there, something that's causing some sort of strife, some sort of where the will cannot be expressed. Maybe you've been feeling like you've had to bite your tongue, something along those lines. This could be like a work setting, maybe it's like a friend setting, a family setting, whatever this setting may be. There's this, everyone's wanting it to be their way with the Five of Wands, and that's not, clearly if that's not working, then I think it's like someone's needing to be a force there, to be the voice of reason, to kind of come through, kind of meditate on this thing where it's like, okay, what's the best attack plan? Because if I just jump in here in this lion pit, nothing's good gonna come from this. But if I, get things under control, I was just picturing you just like kind of just spraying down the cats. If I get them under control, then at least they're listening. They may be a little shocked, but at least now they're listening. They're out of that energy and into something new where someone's establishing this, like, in a way I'm getting dominance, but not in an aggressive way. Someone who's just establishing order. So that's what's coming through with that one. Let's get into your next card, which talks about any sort of romantic matters or marriage, things along those lines. Oh, Jupiter energy all over the place. You got the Wheel of Fortune in reverse here. And the Wheel of Fortune really is just like, it's about the flow of things. there are times when you're on top and times when you're on bottom, and it's like how do you get in the flow of the cycles there, as opposed to getting pulled around the wheel all the time? How do you get to the center where you're observing the phenomenon happening around you, seeing why we got to the low points? And it can be it doesn't have to be always just like epiphanies. It could just like finally something sticking, like, oh, because I do X, this happens. I keep eating said spice. I may love jalapenos, but if I every time I eat jalapenos I get heartburn, then I probably love not having heartburn more than I love jalapenos. And maybe I just work with something else to to achieve that sense of spice. Play around with some different things that aren't so harsh on the stomach. I'm just throwing out a rough example there. But it could be something just as that simple of like, hey, you've been out of the flow for a while, or for maybe even just a little bit. And now it's just time to get into the flow of things. And this, when we're thinking about relationships, that's relationships, like just individuals go through those changes. There are going to be times when we're in our high points and things are going fantastic. There are times when we're both in our lows, but there are times where people are maybe even on opposites, or maybe even like squared sense of the poles here. It could just depend what's happening. I was just talking with my partner about this, where it's like Taurus time is an active time for you, but it's mainly like you got a few squares, but you also have a few trines. So with some effort and some things, there's some movement. Whereas opposed to me, I get a sextile and all squares. Squares all day. So it's just work. Just working, where I tell people, oh, we're being lavish, we're being fun, we're being light in Taurus. I'm out here tilling the fields, sweating. And so it can, it just really depends on what's going on. And I think there's something about honoring when people are going through a thing. And I think maybe even creating that space of like that for that conversation where it's just like, because I'm even getting here where it's like, what do you do when someone's on a winning streak and you're on maybe the opposite end, and you don't want to pull them down, but they don't want to, I think there's a conversation that I think it feels maybe more complex than it actually could be. Like someone, of course, wants to be happy for you because when you win, we win, and vice versa. So that's just something that's kind of coming through there. And, and I'm just getting to like where it's like, even when things where you feel like you both can't be there for each other, sometimes you need to be in your own cycles for a minute. That's not to say that you're separating, because I find that sometimes that what happens is that it's not necessarily maybe there's something in the relationship between the people, as long as that you have changed in some sort of way, but there hasn't been that acknowledgement of like, what does that future mean for us, in a sense. And so, I think that there's a way here that's this energy saying like we can come out about this constructively, where both parties are expanding, in a sense. And I could just be getting in just maybe not necessarily getting in the low flow, but just at least extending that compassion for that, oh, they're in this low space. I'm going to give them space to be in that. I'm going to celebrate my wins over here, and I'm going to give them that space to hermit, and whatever that might look like. Now let's get to your next card here, which talks about any sort of like immediately pressing affairs. Alright, so you got the Six of Swords here. Before I get into that, it was just one more thing with the wheel. Like, you're just thinking about with your progress. I think it's one thing is looking at to acknowledging the progress that you've made together. There's a message that's coming through there, whether this is in a marriage or in a relationship. But I'm also getting brought to, I remember reading this comic once, and there was this really nice scene. This one of the main characters was in this real kind of like the really just low point in one of those low points, and the Wheel of Fortune in reverse. And the main character comes through and proposes to her. Because it's just like, I've seen you in your hermit, may not be, and it's still beautiful to me. I've seen you when you're up and on your highs, and I've seen you at your low, and I want all of that. When we may not maybe sure where this wheel's going to turn next, but we can go together in this thing. So that's just another message that was just kind of coming through there. But you got the Six of Swords here. And it's moving on to calmer shores. You know, they're leaving this, the water's a bit kind of tumultuous back here, got some ripples effects here. And I think that there's something where maybe we're still, there there are more pressing things that are needing to be dealt with, you know, and I think that there's something here about like moving on from a situation here, letting a certain thought process go, possibly to make space for a different sort of future. This could have been, you know, maybe there was a rift or something and, you know, we separated parts, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to find love again or something like that. But there is a, this is giving me just really kind of, whatever this wheel is, kind of like moving into what you want your future to be. It's like these swords are like, you got like, it almost feels like it's like you got a lot that you want to move, you know, like a lot of ideas that you want a future to see, a lot of, you know, a lot of stars that you want to be visible for others to see, whatever this is. Maybe some kind of aspirations, but maybe you're thinking about like, oh, but I got the kids, oh, but I got this, and it's like, how do you find the time for it? There's always enough time, you know, just like it may be a bit of a push, but it's possible, you know. I think even with this Five of Wands, it's just like where maybe we can delegate some things, possibly to make certain movements and certain things happen. You know what I mean? I'm getting a literal just kind of moving energy. Maybe there's been thoughts of that, of maybe moving to where you are more in a flow, possibly where the energy feels supported. So that might be something that's kind of coming through there with this Six of Swords here. All right, let's get to your last card here, which talks about the destiny or the karma of the situation. So you got the Judgment card in reverse here. And this, to me, this is the Judgment for me. This is this elemental fire. You got a lot of fire here. And the Judgment card for me is like this, is the epiphany. You know, there's been this realization, but maybe it's something that's being misunderstood. It almost feels like when something seems like what we may perceive as a bad situation in the moment, but was actually kind of like one of those acts of mercy from spirit. You know, it's like the point behind the tower. You know, when a tower comes through and we you know, a foundation is needed, or even when the Wheel of Fortune in reverse comes through and we realize that we had this epiphany, like, oh, I'm starting to stray off track a little bit. This is starting to affect such and such, you know, whatever that is, you know. I think that like where you're not feeling in control, you know, the fire feels like it's being blowed all over the place, opposed to just kind of steady, is what I'm kind of feeling with this Judgment card here. But I think the situation for whatever's going on through here, that there's just going to be, and it may not be immediately when it hits. It may just be one of those, you'll be doing something and then like a realization hits, like, oh, that's why, you know, this needed to happen for me, or that, oh, that's why this fight made space so that I have more boundaries for things, or that I know how to do this, or whatever that thing is, you know, for you here. So that's what I'm getting with that Judgment. But let's get some advice from Venus. Ooh, look at that. I had a feeling that would come out. So you got the Two of Swords here. It's the Moon in Libra. Let's go ahead and switch back over. I love that. I love when that happens. So with the Two of Swords, this to me is a kind. This is Libra in that indecisive energy. This is where like it's just like there's so many factors that are coming to the fore. I'm feeling this type of way, but I'm thinking about this. The head and the heart are kind of at war with one another, and I think that there is. I think if we really sat with something, it's like if we really sat with something, it's like the answers are there. but I think maybe it's just like because the head and the feelings are at war, the head and the heart are at war, that there's it's taken away from the silence that can be created. I think there's needing to be more space for that to really kind of understand why a situation is the way it's at right now, or why you maybe need to make a certain decision, or why maybe you've been feeling an impulse to make a certain move here, something like that. And this might be something too where maybe it'll make sense in the waning half of this, when we get to the waning half of the cycle, because now this is a waning moon in this card with it being in reverse. So I am too. This is a waning moon. And I think that where you can start things up whenever you start things up, and things will go how they go. But I think that, it's like, it's it's nice when you're able to start something, you have that support with it. It's like going it's like it's one thing to just like maybe like go to an interview, but then in just kind of winging it, as opposed to going to the interview prepared, having made time to study. That sort of level of thing. It's like the why the energies are saying, like, like it's like a don't waffle on a situation. If he needs you to be decisive, Libra is an initiator first and foremost. They are where the thought happens. So Libra's not so indecisive. They know what it's there. They're just not to be afraid of the consequence. There are going to be consequences regardless. Every choice that you make in life ever will always have consequences, and it just depends on how that look. Depends on the day. So, yeah, just something to think about there. But if you like that, if anything resonated with you, give it a thumbs up. And share this if you know somebody who would get some nuggets of wisdom from this. And subscribe there, you hermit. Wheel of Fortune. Hit that. That's an interesting combination. Hit that bell button to get notified when I release videos each day. And I'm going to shuffle for your surprise card of cards here. But if you want to know what's going on with the other celestial bodies, Jupiter and the such, you can check out my other channel, Alchemist Date, where I do weekly videos talking about those transits. I also do videos about different planets and different signs and different houses. And if you just want to work with your chart more personally, you want to see what's going on in the cosmos as far as like transits, or get to know your natal chart better. Maybe you just want a tarot card reading, an I-Ching reading. In the description box, there's a link to get in touch with me if you want to have questions about my services. But how to book a service with me, is all in the description box there. Send me payment, I send you a link, and then we have a good old time. So if that's something that you want to look at that, you're building connections, and if that's something that you want to, if you're interested in, that's available for you. But let's go ahead and get into your surprise cards here. Okay, so you have the Surrender card here, and then you have the Ahimsa card here. And the surrender is learning to, I got, it's they say to trust the process, but it's like trust the progress. If what you're doing, let's say, there are going to be times in the journey where things are going smooth, and then there are going to be times where they hiccup. And I think it's in the hiccups, it's like, okay, but look how far you've come. You used to maybe would respond like this to a situation, but now you're doing it like this. Because that's what this Ahimsa is about. It's learning to transcend, our initial kind of like judgments and reactions through compassion. Judgment card. That might be something here too. Maybe again, you're judging yourself in a situation. You got off the wheel a little bit, and reflect on that. Hermit. Because you're doing the best you can with the tools, and that's just not just for you, but to acknowledge when people too. Where everyone's at where they're at. And you may not like it. That's not to say that we put up with a certain behavior, whatever that is. But I think that it's just to invite the space, for opposing things where, I may not like how someone's reacting, but what if I were going through the same transits working with those tools? What would that look like? And when I really know, it's easy to say what to do for other people, but when you're going through something and they're looking at you like, what are you doing? Then, it kind of, it brings that home. you know, in a sense, and just creates that we're all just kind of, we have great transits, we have transits. We just have transits, and it doesn't matter. It's just, the only thing that matters is what you intend to do with it. You know, and whatever that means, like, okay, I've been on this track, there's this opportunity coming here, I can do this. You know, then that's it. And then you focus on that. I want that. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. And then you're doing it. You're doing the thing. And then it's a part of you. And that obviously changes things. The environment responds in kind. You know, and then you just keep doing that. And you grow, you expand, you get in the flow, and now you're observing the flow as opposed to being whipped around on the wheel. So trust the progress. Trust the progress and question the stagnation. But until next time, stay mindful out there. You keep eyes on that moon. Moon's always changing, fluctuating. And I will catch you. Where am I going to? Oh, I know when I'm going to catch you. On the next one, Saturn Day.